Good evening. This is Al Cuppett talking to you, and you're on the Midnight Rider newscast show, and we expect that you'll get your ears perked up tonight. There's some things that are happening out there, and you need to know about it. If you don't know about it, you're going to be in real alerts very shortly.
I welcome this kind of examination.
We came,
and for the international order that we have worked for generations to build.
A new world order. A new world order.
we saw.
If suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe.
Always talk to you like they're the boss.
And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House!
He died.
Ah!
He died.
But that's a wicked woman.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
You can keep it. Period. 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 They are the focus of evil in the modern world. It's a catastrophe.
Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome.
This is the Midnight Rider News Podcast. Hello, America and the world. Welcome to the Midnight Rider News Podcast, a production of MidnightRiderNews.com. And as I stated last week, please remember that the writer in Midnight Rider News is spelled W-R-I-T-E-R, as in someone who writes. I'm S.T. Patrick, the editor-in-chief of Midnight Rider News, back with you again for another episode of the show. So before we begin, I want to thank those of you that downloaded the show last week. The response was phenomenal, and we were all very excited about it. We were downloaded the most in the Peoria and Bloomington region of Central Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, the Norfolk, Newport News region of Virginia, Elmira, New York, Houston, Texas, Madison, Wisconsin, Dallas, Texas, Southern Illinois, the Bay Area of California, and Eastern Kansas. So to everyone in those regions, thank you, and thanks for sharing the show. For everyone else, thank you also, but please share the show with your friends on Facebook. Now, I want to thank our international listeners also. We had some fantastic listenership in Australia, as well as the UK and elsewhere in Europe. And again, thank you. Please continue sharing the show. The feedback has been completely humbling. And so once again, thank you all so much, and please continue listening to future episodes of the show. I'm excited to finally tell you that we are available on iTunes for downloading. Subscriptions, of course, are free, as they are with most iTunes podcasts, and the direct link is on the website at the bottom of the story describing this episode. So you can set the show to automatically download new episodes when they become available. There is still a donation button on the MidnightRiderNews.com website. Please help us if you can, and if you like what we do, we could sure use it. Tonight is episode 002 of the show. It is entitled Al Cuppett versus the New World Order. This will be a little different from episode 001 for two reasons. One, Al is our only guest on this show. The show is about his ideology, his experiences, and his views on what is to come. Second, due to some cell phone problems that we had when recording the show, the interview is much shorter than we had first scheduled or had intended. So after the interview, Al has given us permission to air some audio from a few of his most well-known presentations. So we're going to do that. Tonight will be a microscope for many of you who have never had a glimpse into the Christian Patriot movement. At the end of the show, I will tell you why it is vitally important for all of us in the alternative news and perspective scene. That includes me, that includes you. Why we should at least understand the movement, even if you do not agree with all of its goals, even if you do not agree with its ideology, we should still understand it. After all, how are we any better than the mainstream media, or its ever-decreasing tens of fans, if we don't listen to and try to understand other factions within our own movement? So for those of you who have never heard Al Cuppett, I think you're in for something a little different than you may be used to hearing. He's a whistleblower from the 1990s, first of all. And so before there was a Snowden, before there was an Assange, there was an Al Cuppett. Like John Perkins, the author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman, Al Cuppett has been there. He's been in the middle of the storm. He knows how these operations work, and he will explain them to you tonight. Al has worked extensively with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and has spent the last 30 years traveling the country in search of what he believes are concentration camps in America, foreign troops amassing on U.S. soil, the red, the green, and the blue lists. Wait till you hear about the red, the green, and the blue lists. And signs of what he believes is an upcoming civil war between freedom-loving patriots and those who mindlessly, and I would say passively, support the capital S state. So tonight we bring you the travels and trials of Al Cuppett. Al, let's begin with your background. Would you give us a brief bio, please?
Okay, I can do that. I spent 21 years in the Army. I spent 9 more years in the Pentagon at both top secret and 22 years at top secret and about 8 years at above top secret. I've lived in 34 countries. I've learned to speak 5 languages. I spent 15 years overseas. And I've got 19 years joint service, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And people ask me what seminary I went to. I said, I went to the Saigon on your knees seminary for 15 months in Vietnam. And when you're on your knees praying, the Lord shows you a lot of stuff. And you always seem to think that other people should know this stuff, but they don't know it. They do not know it. And the church is asleep right now. And like General Prater had a sign on his desk, what you don't know won't hurt you, it will kill you. And the prophet of God, Isaiah, I think it was, he said, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. You won't be lacking knowledge when you leave here tonight, but you got to get it together quick, and you need to start praying. You should get up early in the morning and do some praying, because we are in trouble, folks. We're in serious trouble right now.
Well, Al, you went into military service because you were a patriot, because you believed you were fighting for the side of right. Do you remember when your eyes began to open and when you first discovered that something was terribly amiss out in the heartland?
Yeah, I came to that conclusion. I went out on a tour with the Popsy Club, 40-city tour, and I got all the input from some of the folks out there, what they've been seeing, what they've been hearing. I was on a state program at Brother Stair in 92, and people started sending me information and sending me pictures of stuff that's in the country. And I saw what was happening to our military, what was going on in the military forces and our defense posture. I saw they were shutting everything down. Clinton and Bush had shut things down. And I realized that what they were telling me on the TV set was not what they were telling us, what the Lord was showing me, and was not what was going on. We would think it's really bad behind the scenes, because they've had these false flag operations. There have been false flag operations, and somebody else gets blamed, and it's all been done by foreign operators in our country. And they're here by the hundreds of thousands, I want to tell you now, folks.
Wow, the hundreds of thousands.
Oh my goodness, yes. They're all over the place. So that's when I came to it back in 92, and then in 98, I found out about it on the tour.
Al, it seems that the basis for much of the Christian Patriot Movement's ideas that the state is moving towards taking away guns from legal carriers is based upon this State Department publication 7277, which was released in 1961. Now, if you wouldn't mind, let me just summarize the objectives here. The publication is called Freedom from War, the United States Program for General and Complete Disarmament in a Peaceful World. Again, general and complete. It states that first, there must be complete disarmament. Second, all disarmament obligations must be subject to effective international controls. Let me repeat that again. International controls. Third, adequate peacekeeping machinery must be established. It does make you wonder, Al, who defines adequate and what exactly peacekeeping machinery is? Well, it doesn't appear that the U.S. Constitution, as it would be null and void in an international mission with international authority, so not the U.S. Constitution. It also states that this can only be achieved through the progressive strengthening of international institutions under the United Nations and by creating a United Nations peace force to enforce the peace as the disarmament process proceeds. The goals here are really stated multiple times throughout the document: complete disarmament and strengthening international institutions. The actual enforcement of this publication would have rested in the hands, no surprise here, of UN forces. It seems to clearly state, without stating it directly, that the populace should be completely unarmed, whereas the international forces should be significantly strengthened and fully armed. What do you think about that publication, and where do you think we are at with it today?
Yeah, that's old hat. But they put that out, and that's what's going down. That's what they're following. That's what the Council on Foreign Relations Commission and all these other secret organizations, that's the plan they're following. They plan on taking all the guns.
Yeah, I never understood why 1961. I never understood why the JFK years, because it seems like just the kind of plan that JFK would not approve. So why do you think it was offered up then?
I don't know. I just know that they dreamed that thing up in 1952. The World Parliament of Parliamentarians dreamed that up and come up with that plan. I put it on the video straight from the Joint Chiefs. I showed the plan on the video. That was in 1998. And in that video I mentioned we had three major factions against us. We had one, the Russians and Chinese, as a group. We had the New World Order against us, which includes the shadow government. And we also had the Muslims. And I said that in 1998, not really knowing how bad the Islamic threat was going to be.
Now, last week we had two guests talking about the assassination of JFK and the story of Lee Harvey Oswald. I'm very interested to know your take on it. What do you think really happened to JFK in Dallas?
That's exactly what happened. Oswald was framed as a false flag. There was a gunfire, shot fired from that grassy knoll. His head went down, and William Greer was the driver of the car. And in the Zapruder film, and he's gone now, the Zapruder film, if you see it for 7 iterations, there's a video out there called JFK 2, and on the 7th iteration, you can see the driver come around with a stainless steel 45 caliber pistol and shoot Kennedy in the head. And you can see it. You can actually see it, and I saw it. And that's what blew the back of his head out, and that's why Jackie got out of that car, because she heard that gun go off. It was right in front of her, about 2 feet in front of her when it went off, and she tried to get out of that car in that pink suit.
Now, you said earlier that there were hundreds of thousands of foreign troops on U.S. soil.
Right.
How did you first learn about that?
Okay. Well, the first thing I realized, in 1994, on the 14th day of December, I heard a broadcast. It said the President had authorized the importation of 700,000 Makarov 9mm pistols timed 18 to cartridge length. And I said, those will be the sidearms for the UN peacekeepers, supplies and equipment prior to offensive operations. Stuff had to be pre-positioned. And those were the pistols. And 1 week later, the newspaper recorded that an AN-124 had landed at Huntsville, Alabama. The plane was too big to land at Redstone Arsenal's airport, the post airport, and they shipped the first plane load of men to a Redstone Arsenal. And I said, these are the UN peacekeepers or the Russian peacekeepers' sidearms. And you wouldn't want to call them peacekeepers because they're going to not keep any peace at all. They're going to kill people. But I was speaking 4 years later for the Prophecy Club in Denver, and a cop walked up to me on the break and said, Al, we got a problem here. I said, what's that? We got cops here who have international crimes enforcement badges on their breast pocket. The first time I saw one was in 1994 when I saw a regional police car in Pennsylvania and took a picture of it. Okay? The foreign troops and the foreign cops that are here. And, I've got a letter I put out, and there are 6 funding programs which fund these foreign cops. The guns are flown in 1994 to Redstone Arsenal, and I was saying that I was speaking for the Prophecy Club in 1998 in Denver, Colorado, and a cop walked up to me and said, Al, we got guys and policemen here with black uniforms that are foreign cops. He said they got federal ID cards, they got honorary pro-council diplomatic plates, they're driving big black SUVs, have International Crimes Enforcement Police on their badges, they have Makarov pistols, Al, and they are foreigners, and they're in our midst, and we can't do a thing about it. And that was 4 years after the pistols were imported to Redstone Arsenal in 1994. So the pistols brought in 94 and were issued in 4 years' time. I found them, they'd been issued in Colorado. And the UN, the National Guard paper, which came out in 94 in April, said that there'd be Ukrainians in California, there'd be Slovenians in Colorado, there would be, I think, Romanians in Alabama. And sure enough, this guy had a SLOV sticker. He was in Denver, Colorado, and he had an SLOV sticker on his car. That means Slovenia. That's an international sign for Slovenia. And the guy was there, and I knew as soon as I saw the import of the pistols. It was for the sidearms for these incoming foreign cops. And I covered all that on the Straight from the Joint Chiefs video, which I made in 1998. They're here to peacekeep and crack. They're here to take over our police forces. That's what they're here for. The plan sends our guys went down to our Marines went down to Australia in 96 and 97 and took the guns away from the Australians. They sent our Marines down there in accordance with the plan because they speak English. And they trained them at Quantico in 3-man teams in 1995.
Now, I've heard the theory before that we have foreign troops in our country because Americans won't turn on Americans. Do you believe that's true?
Well, obviously, that's absolutely they won't. American cops have national allegiance. They believe in the Constitution. 90% of them are not going to try to take guns away from their own people. The SS pulled the same thing. The SS took guys from Stuttgart and put them in Bremerhaven. They took the SS guys from Bremerhaven and put them in Frankfurt, and they took the ones in Frankfurt and put them in Leipzig, and they put the ones in Leipzig, they put them in Stuttgart. There was no local allegiance allowed. And in fact, our own police forces now, when there was a raid made down here in the 3rd District, the 3rd Police Region, they used them from the 7th Division. They brought them all the way down here, 50, 60 miles down here, so that these cops would not know anybody in the area they were operating in. They always do that. They always do that. They bring in foreigners or people who are not from the local area because the local area cops won't mess with their own people. That's what they're doing.
I once heard you describe your experiences at an ominous FEMA camp outside of Indianapolis. Would you tell us about that tonight? It's
a Beech Grove Amtrak repair facility. It's completely fenced in with 3 fences. It has NSA turnstiles to get in and out. And I went there on the only day of the month where they had open house. I got in to see the guard. He was an Amtrak guard. He had a black uniform in his locker, and he was an American. But they're not going to. And there was a boxcar building there with you could run 4 boxcars into it, and it had blowers in it that could blow heat or air into it or gas into it. And there was evacuation fans on top that could pull the gas out. They can fumigate 4 boxcars at one time in that building out there at Beech Grove. Well, the Third Reich. Okay, let me explain it. The Third Reich was defeated. The Third Reich was defeated physically in Germany on May the 5th, 1945. Okay, but the spiritual part of that thing, the spiritual entity, was not defeated. The satanic entity, which is the witchcraft and stuff, and the satanic power which dealt with Hitler, was not defeated. And since the loss of the authorized version in the pulpits and the loss of the songbook for the past 40 years, we've lost the spiritual power in our churches, and evil comes in. When you lose the power in the churches, the evil comes in, and the evil is a form of foreign forces, because Israel, when they sinned, the Lord sent foreign military to take over their country. The same thing is happening in America. And Lincoln said, we'll never be taken from without, we'll be taken from within if we're ever taken down. And that's how it's happening. And Bush, Clinton, Bush, and Obama are the guys who spearheaded this thing for the past 25 years.
Now, FEMA and the federal government would have you believe that they're constructing these camps as sort of places to go for the people who have been involved in a hurricane so that you don't have to, for example, go to a sports arena and stay for 3 days. Now, why do you think they're being constructed?
Well, it'll be instruction as termination centers, mainly because the ones they're going after on the red and blue list are Christians, patriots, okay, and they're going to get the Jews also. They've got detention cells in all the international airports right now, and they've got foreign cops operating in the back of those rooms up there. It happened down in Phoenix. They got foreign cops at Phoenix. They murdered Carol Ann Goetbaum back here in October of 2007. And there weren't Americans that did it. It was foreign cops and foreign troops from the Partnership for Peace. It's called the Cops on the Street. It's called Community Police. It's called Project Harmony. And Obama's stimulus bill was strictly billions of dollars to pay police salaries. His jobs bill was billions of dollars to pay police salaries, and they're not American police salaries. And the funding was done in 6 programs, including the mortgage bailout bill. They had billions in the mortgage bailout bill for cops and firefighters. But they're not for American cops. We're laying off American cops for lack of funding now. This is going on, folks. This is no joke. This is the New World Order, the shadow government, and this is the forces of hell that have come down upon this country, and the American church is asleep, sleep, sleep, and they're going to be taken to camps, and it's going to be bloody like you've never seen, folks. This is no joke.
Now, those boxcars have to come from somewhere and from someone. Who's constructing those?
The Steel Boxcar Company is Gunderson Steel Railroad Car Division, and they're building the cars up there. There was 102,800 on the contract. They're different. They got 3 rows of windows in them, about 8 inches in diameter. You can't get out of them. There's 3 levels in those boxcars. I got pictures of them.
Whew, wow. I guess now's the time to ask, Al, what are the red, green, and blue lists, and how do they come about?
Well, there are 10 FEMA regions, and CIA, one of the good guys, intercepted a list of names for FEMA Region 3 blue list. And on that blue list, he found this FBI agent's name, and he showed it to the FBI agent in Richmond, Virginia, and he showed it to my buddy Steve, and Steve saw Dewey's name on it, and Steve saw his daddy's name on it, and his son's name on it. He saw his name on it. So it turned out to be the regional blue list. The Germans used red, blue, and green lists in World War, and on the 30th day of June 1934, it's called the Night of the Long Knives. They pitted the army against the brown shirts, who were the Sturmabteilung, the SA as they call them, run by Ernest Röhm, who was a homosexual, by the way. And on the 30th of June 1934, they had been put out the propaganda that the army was being the army officers of the Weimar Republic, the loyalist army officers, were going to round up the brown shirts, and then they told the brown shirts the same thing. They told them that, and then they told the army officers that the brown shirts are after them. And the night of the Long Knives, at midnight, they went out with the SS in the black uniforms and arrested the leadership of the brown shirts and executed all the military officers who were not loyal to Hitler on the spot, summarily executed them. And they had a red, blue, and a green list. And we've got the same thing here because I found out about the list Steve Quayle discovered the year I found it in 95, and Steve had a guy go to FEMA headquarters and work on the computers, and he found 6.2 million names on red and blue lists. American names on the red and blue lists at the FEMA headquarters, now Homeland Security. That's what happened.
Who are on the list?
Well, you and me, for one. You and me are going to be on the red list, for sure, okay? Then Ellis Jones, and he doesn't talk about the Jesuits, so he may be part of a problem, but he has put out some good information. Steve Quayle is going to be on the list. But the red list has 8 categories, and the first, I told you, it was a satanic operation, and category 1 on the red list is Christian women for satanic sacrifice. I saw the thing about 15 years ago. I saw the list. I saw the categories because it's satanic. This thing is Hillary Clinton's a 4th-degree witch. She's into witchcraft up to her ears, brother. She is, in fact, you know, when people are possessed of the devil, they have a sulfur smell about them. They smell like sulfur. You know what that is? That's brimstone from the pit of hell. And Obama smells like that, and so does Hillary. And I just read a book about the conquest of Mexico, and the Cortez went in there and captured Montezuma. He said all the witch doctors smelled like sulfur. And I just read about it. That's good grief. That's the same thing that's going on up there in Washington. This thing is satanic from the word go. Just as Hitler's SS was into witchcraft and devil worship, well, I mean, that's where this evil stuff comes from. But people, you know, some people don't even believe in the devil. And then we never list out there because the roads are marked with, back in the 90s, the roads are marked as red, blue, and green signs. The convoy route markers, because the new guys that were here from overseas, these guys from overseas, didn't know where they were going, so they marked the roads to the camps and stuff, and to the centers. They marked them with military route convoy route markers, okay? Just like they did in Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, they had no maps. The civilians had no maps in Eastern Europe during the Cold War because they tried to escape to the west. So they had convoy route markers for all the military troops, and the police that guided them on a code word system to certain places, important places, so the civilians, if they knew which way east was or west was, and they had maps, they would escape towards the west zone, you know, the western part of the country, to West Germany. So they didn't let them have any maps over there. They put these road signs up.
And this is S.T. Patrick. We're with Al Cuppett, and this is the Midnight Rider News Podcast. We'll be right back. When you want an alternative perspective that challenges the way we think, the way we are taught, and the way we believe, go to MidnightWriterNews.com and read the works of S.T. Patrick, Juliet Toth, and the rest of the Midnight Writer News team. At MidnightWriterNews.com, we speak truth to power, we fight for justice for those who've been treated unjustly, we challenge societal norms, and we always question authority. Please join us at MidnightWriterNews.com today. That's MidnightWriter, W-R-I-T-E-R, news.com. Hey, this is S.T. Patrick, back on the Midnight Writer News podcast. Now, we lost the phone connection with Al Cuppett about this point in the interviews, and we talked to him a few times later that night, then we talked to him again the next day. And it seems like we were just having some phone problems. So Al gave us permission to play some audio from some presentations he made to the Prophecy Club. So without further ado, here's Al Cuppett talking about black operations.
Think about martial law. Martial law is completely strange to all of us. I didn't put it on the video, but I went and saw a FEMA guy in 1985, I believe it was, and he had a top secret code word clearance. And I said, why have you got a top secret code word clearance? We got him, we can't tell you. Flood and Mud? Flood and Mud's got a top secret code word clearance, huh? What are you hiding from the people? We ain't telling you. I went back over and asked this old fellow over there, I said, what's going on over there? It's a continuity of government plan that's going to regionalize the United States. That's what it's all about. Now, this thing right here is a drop sign manufactured by Vaisala Corporation. This drop sign was dropped behind a man's house. It wasn't dropped, sir, from a Lockheed Electra. It was dropped from a helicopter at midnight. And yes, it's a weather sign that does all the stuff. Barometric pressure. I got the operations manual on it. I know what it does. I'm a communicator for 32 years, and I know what that'll do, too. It dropped behind his house. He brought it here to this meeting, 19 February. He didn't bring it, he sent it to me. This thing has the capability to transmit 300 different frequencies. In other words, they could drop 300 of them behind houses, and it would locate your position within an inch or 2 inches or so, or a little more, from the GPS satellite constellation. It'd locate where you are. It broadcasts temperature, dew point, humidity, barometric pressure. The exact things that a chopper pilot would need to know to land in your backyard. It also transmits the wind direction as it's falling from an airplane at 20,000 feet. It can transmit 200 miles line of sight from up there. It's also got a, has a battery port on it right here to charge the battery. It has a data port to program what frequency it'll broadcast on. And it broadcasts the frequency from this little, probably an 1/8 wavelength antenna right here. Once it's dropped behind your house by the chopper, that's one witness. The second witness is the drop sign behind your house. It has an elastic thing on it. It was deployed. It's deployed from a module. The chopper or the ground team that comes after you is also triangulating on GPS. They have 3 witnesses. This is the right house. Yes, it's an innocuous drop sign, but it's being used for a pernicious purpose, regardless of what the Air Weather Service says, or the National Weather Service, or NOAA. Because I talked to a fellow who'd spent 20 years in the Air Force Security Service. He's now working for the National Weather Service. He says, that thing, brother, does exactly what you say it does. It locates you. The man was fortunate to be here in the morning. Evidently they failed to come find him. Because when the team comes after you, they take the drop sign with them. If one's behind your house, you find it at night, be careful. Throw it in a bucket of water. But it still does exactly that. By the way, the guy who wrote this email to us and told us this. There was a federal agent in the meeting in Baltimore. 10 minutes before the close of the meeting, the question and answer session, the sister stood up and she said, brother, the Lord would have me tell you that there is a federal agent here. Say on, sister, use the mic. And she come under the anointing of the Holy Ghost and she said, and she spoke first person, there are no secret servants, there is no secret service in my kingdom, and there are no secrets hidden from me. I would adjure you, therefore, to do what is right. Stand up, stand up, stand up, and do what is right. And that was it. That was the prophetic message. And he wouldn't look at her the rest of the night. Damage control after the last tour. By the way, this is the drop sonde right there. That's one of the specification manual I have on it. It does what I told you it does. There was a campaign to discredit the Prophecy Club after the February tour. They have damage control, okay? Ron Brown's head photo, which I showed you with the bullet hole, the dry ice bullet hole. After the Prophecy Club tour in February, there was a concentrated effort to show you a skull with lead fragments to prove the Prophecy Club's man wrong. Except there were no x-rays remaining. They were all taken from the archives at Rockville, Maryland, and they conjured that thing up to try to pull a snow job on you. Obfuscation, it's called. There were no lead fragments because it was a dry ice wad cutter. The Lord told me that. If you read the video, see the video right here, you'll understand that. The heliport photo I showed you, this heliport photo, when I first sent my paper out, they came down and tore the barricades down. This is a cul-de-sac, a quarter-mile long at the end of a short road. After the Prophecy Club's tour, they went out and tried to camouflage the thing and say, it's not a helicopter pad. This is what it is. They say it's a road they're putting through there. Well, the deputies already saw the helicopters land there and called me and told me. They watched it through binoculars. They tried to cover it up. I talked about Jody Houston Truitt on a couple of the meetings. She was a New World Order exposer, TV in Mason City, Iowa. She was kidnapped in 1995. She never been seen since. After the tour, before the tour was over in Iowa, they were broadcasting, well, we found a handprint on the side of a car. We're looking for a murderer rapist. She wasn't kidnapped by the UN, in other words. Okay? Well, folks, how do you know she was kidnapped or murdered or raped or whatever? You haven't found her body yet. Okay? Secondly, you find a handprint 2.5 years on a car. What good is that? That's contaminated evidence. It was a snow job campaign to discredit what I said. The $900 or $640 toilet seat, as soon as the tour was over, I told you about the C5A, the toilet seat cost too much money. Well, that toilet seat's about 4 foot square. When you buy 300 of them for a C5A, they cost $105 a piece. If you buy one 25 years later, custom made, they cost $600. But you know, these DOD guys, don't believe them. They can't even make a toilet seat right, you know. That's the reason they put that ploy out. Guillotines. I'd heard about some guillotines on the Mississippi River being exposed about 3 years ago. When I was in Texas, I won't say the city, the MC took me aside and said, did you see the lady there? Yeah. The two daughters? Yes. She wants me to tell you the following. She said her brother works out in San Francisco, Oakland area as a stevedore or longshoreman, and they dropped a big container one day, and that baby busted open, and it had guillotines inside of it about that high with hand-loaded spring handles on them. Anyhow, there was another fella backed into him out there in this truck and tore the thing open, and they found guillotines in there. Now, what in the world would they be doing with guillotines? Well, the Bible says somebody's going to get beheaded. As simple as that. It's twice in Revelation. Latest photos of UN equipment. Here is Lafayette, Georgia, bus company. Folks, that's not a misspelled word. That is UN. Inside of this window here is a gun cage where the guard can stand in there with a gun and guard the prisoners. He can guard the prisoners. The man who took this did not want to take a picture of the gun cage. He was a little scared. And if he's not a Christian, I don't blame him. We have many of the Humvees. They're all over the country. This one happens to be probably at Quantico, but they're all over the country with UN on the side of it. Here we have another little ditty that didn't come out quite right, but I'll let you see it anyhow. This is the Catoosa Training Center in Catoosa County, Georgia. The guards guarding it on this particular day happened to have a sticker, a badge, a patch on their shoulder which said Tennessee Military Police in Georgia. There are no entities or no entity as the Tennessee Military Police, okay? It says here, licensed to state of Tennessee. Where's the article, the? Somebody dropped out the article, the. They can't use English too well. It should say licensed to the state of Tennessee. That tells me something about the guy that wrote it. He doesn't know English very well. Then it says combined maneuvers. All right, let me explain something to you. Joint maneuvers are U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines, or any of the two in together or more than two together. That's joint operations, joint. Combined means foreign forces with our forces, or foreign combined forces amongst themselves. Usually it's with our guys. That's what that means. Well, my buddy saw it. He went down and got on a radio program with Congressman Barr, told Congressman Barr about it. Congressman Barr evidently dug into it. 3 weeks later, he goes back to the place, and the place has been sanitized. Nothing is there. He goes up and sees one guy in there. He says, "Hey, what's going on? Did you have any UN troops here?" It was American. "Yeah, we had them, but we had too many foreign resistors around here." So they left. They sanitized their act. Here's a German air defense bus near Holloman Air Force Base. Why do we need German air defense here? I'm going to tell you why. I showed you in the video about all the prepositioned equipment. What we have now is anti-aircraft forces in the country. There was a military officer who counted 128 SAM Soviet missiles, surface-to-air missiles on a flat car train in Indiana. Jane's Book of Armaments tells you it takes 16 of these missile batteries to every Soviet division. If you divide 16 into 128, I might not be good at theology, but I can count, and that means 8 Soviet divisions. Fort Myer, Virginia, a welder was taken in to weld. They put blinders on him so he couldn't see what he was doing, and he heard foreigners all around him talking. 3 VMI cadets from Virginia Military Institute went to Fort Bragg to see where their new home was going to be. They took some pictures on an open, free post where you can drive on of something. Whatever they took a picture of, their cameras were taken, the film taken, they were told to get off the post. This is what they used to do in Yugoslavia and Hungary. Now it's America they're doing it to, on a free open post. Denver, a police officer walked up to me, and you cops out there listening, I belong to the Virginia State Sheriff's Institute, and I support the Virginia State Police Association. He walked up to me and he says, "We have, here in Denver, cops running around here with black uniforms on that speak funny, don't talk right, and they got a badge which says International Crime Enforcement Police." He says, on the bottom in Latin it says, "Nothing without God," but it's not the God that we serve they're talking about. In Spokane, a sister, in Phoenix. By the way, these guys in Denver had SLOV, Slovenia, on the stickers on their cars they were driving. SLOV for Slovenia, like EST for Estonia and MV for Moldavia in the video. When I refer to the video, I'm referring to the Joint Staff video that we showed earlier. When I got to Spokane, a sister walked up to me, and folks, stand by for this one. She said, "Me and my sister went to Camp Lejeune to videotape my son's graduation at a Marine Corps graduation, and we videotaped it, and then we went by the parade ground, and there was all these guys goose-stepping. And when they goose-stepped, they kicked their left foot out like this. And they were goose-stepping on the parade ground. They videotaped both of them. Both of them videotaped it. And when they got home, their video cameras were blitzed out. Nothing was on it. Well, then we find the following news. Multinational exercise stresses cooperation. Well, it's Cooperative Osprey 1998. Here it shows 16 nations waving their flags. 13 of them, or actually 15 of them, are not Americans. They're waving their flags on our soil, in our faces, okay? 13 of them, Canada and Holland and the U.S. 16, 13 makes 3 plus 13 makes 16. But who are the others? Albania, Bulgaria, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, some other Kyrgyzstan, don't know who that is. Latvia, Lithuania, Moldavia, Poland, Romania, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Holland, Canada. The first 13 are Soviet satellite countries. They're Russians. Здравствуйте, товарищ, откуда вы? You know, where you from, comrade? What are they practicing? They were practicing 6 disciplines. 1, convoy operations, how to get to your house. 2, military ops in urban terrain, if you live in the city. 3, indoor simulator marksmanship training. They're going to bust in houses and live fire. They're going to be shooting when they come in. Civil disturbance and mass casualty operations. That's what they expect to happen. Checkpoint operations, weapons disarmament. Do you have safe and sober checks here in Indiana where the cop stops you and checks your breath and your license? Desensitization, just being stopped at night. You stop there, there's a sheriff in a brown suit, he checks your breath. Hi, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so going home. You know you vote for the guy, right? One day you come down the road at night and the sheriff's wearing black uniforms tonight. See the video and understand what I'm saying. Oh, the sheriff's wearing a black mask tonight. Huh, must be a drug bust. Oh, the sheriff's got a clipboard tonight. Oh, the sheriff's got a black helicopter and a black van over there with the windows shaded. And you get jerked, and he says, good evening, what's your name? Ah, come with me, and out you go for a helicopter ride. That's what the safe and sober checks are for, policemen. You're desensitizing the people to what's going to happen. You want to see what they're doing? Here's a raid. Here's a raid on a Spotsylvania County home. The sheriff is wearing these Nazi outfits, okay, see it? And this is subliminal, folks. This is a white Caucasian fella, and most of the militia folks and most of the conservative problem children are Caucasian. And guess what's here? Look carefully what you see here. What is it? It's a Bible. You know what that subliminal message is? This was a staged photograph. The subliminal message is crooks read Bibles. Crooks have Bibles. Caucasian militiamen, or Caucasian crooks in this case, have Bibles. That's the subliminal message. It was a staged photograph. When I get to see the sheriff of Spotsylvania County, I'm going to show him my DOD ID cards and call his hand, okay? Phoenix, a cop walked up to me and he said, we have 12 Russian cops on the force, and brother, that's 12 too many. Mexican brother in Dallas sitting about right there, he said, brother, I went back to Mexico and my home state is full of Russian soldiers. They're all over the place in Russia. The Lord is my witness. Spokane sister said her brother was in the National Guard. They're going to train them this month and next and send them all to Bosnia. There we go again. F.E. Warren Air Force Base. A young man called his father. I know the man personally. He says, my son called me and told me that they got foreign officers in command of these missile bases at Francis E. Warren, and we got to salute these turkeys. And they can't even speak English. Our missile bases are commanded by foreigners right now. The Lord is my witness. Hanging Dog, North Carolina. Hiker saw a bunch of troops out there, UN troops. One of them got his hand blown off and had to go to Murphy, North Carolina Hospital. This is black operations, folks. Black ops. What was he doing getting his hand blown off? I'll tell you what he was doing. He was, one, practicing throwing hand grenades, okay? Or two, he was practicing setting demolition charges in our country. Blank slide here for MOX-CBA. Oklahoma City, a brother told me, he said, I saw a police car, a black Chevy Caprice. And that black Chevy Caprice had Moscow police on the side of it. I ran in to get a camera, got out there too late. But that's what he told me. There it was. So what's new? They're all over the place. Mr. Clinton was, no, disregard that. I'll get that in a moment. Sister called up, said that her daughter had went to Texas to be an English second language teacher. All the students are Chinese, every one of them. USMC vehicle on Route 29 in Charlottesville, Virginia. There is an armored car. It's got 4 wheels and it had subdued USMC on the side of it. I told you the Lord allowed me to speak 5 languages. And these guys, when they saw me taking pictures, they went by and hollered at me, but it wasn't in English and it wasn't in Spanish, Greek, Italian, or German. It was a foreign language. The plot is huge, and I'm going to show you what they're doing. Didn't have time on the first video. I'm going to show you now. Stand by for a shock. In 1939, and from 33 to 39, Hitler had demonized a certain segment of the population. He had demonized first the Dutch communists. The Dutch communists were charged with burning down the Reichstag when Hermann Goering did it. They blamed the Dutch communists. Then they started demonizing the Jews. They had, as the video showed you before, they had tracking systems, transport systems. They had thugs hired. They had black uniformed thugs waiting in the wings. And they had camps. The brown shirts were the Sturmabteilung. On the night of 30 June, the night of the long knives, they went out with a red list. We talked about the red list. They knocked on the doors of all the German Weimar Republic officers, the colonels and the generals, because they had the keys to the armories. They had the weapons. The brown shirts had the weapons, the Lugers on their hip. The army had the other weapons. They were pitting the armed factions against each other. What happened was, they knocked on the doors. Are you Zinzi General Hauptmann? Jawohl. Bam. Shot him in the head and killed him. When the brown shirts had got through killing all the generals off, shortly thereafter, the SS came in the black uniforms that were hiding with Heinrich and Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich, and they killed the brown shirts off and took over the country for Hitler. The same scenario is now in our country. This video, you saw this video, and this first one will show you that. Now, they had a red list and a blue list. In 1993 through 98, we find this administration demonizing certain segments of society. First, they demonized the smokers. Those nasty smokers, get them outside. Next thing, they have set up a demonization mechanism. That is the president, the politicians, some of the turncoats, and the press. The next group of people, all they have to do then is insert a new set of names in the mechanism. They're going to go right to gun owners now, because they've got to get to the heart of their problem. They've taken the spiritual power by polluting the Bibles, and now they're looking for the gun owners because physical power comes out of a gun barrel. What we have, and I'll show you how they did it. They have transport systems. I showed them to you in the video. They got tracking systems, thugs, foreigners, black uniforms, and camps. They are pitting the armed factions of this country against each other, the Americans against Americans. This is how they're doing it. At Waco, an FBI agent on the range at Quantico was asked, what happened in July 93, or in April 93, by an Army sniper I know. And the agent said, one of my buddies, and I won't mention his job or his position, at Waco, told me we were backed off on the 49th day, the BATF was backed off, the rank and file FBI guys were backed off. And somebody came in and burned that place down with tanks and weapons and uniforms. It was Task Force 6 out of Fort Hood, and it was probably a bunch of Partnership for Peace guys. I'll tell you why I know. Because this brother, and this brother, and this brother, we will not burn down American kids. It was foreigners who did it. But Janet Reno said that she did it. So the conservative faction has been told that the FBI burned the building down. They are pitting the armed factions against us, against the conservative, Bible-carrying, and whatever citizens. At the same time, they're being told through downward-directed propaganda. They're being told the conservative people are your enemies. You who wear the uniform and the badge, you have to go after them because they're after you. The military's been told this, and the police are being told this. I'll prove it to you shortly. And so this is what they're doing. They're pitting the armed factions against each other. Very slick propaganda. At Waco, the basement cabinet told the BATF to be out of the building on a picnic. The bomb went off. It was, I'll explain it a little later on, it wasn't fertilizer. The BATF, for conservatives, found out the BATF were out of the building. It looks like the rank and file BATF guys blew the building down. They didn't do it. They just want their pension. They just want to retire like you and me. Anyhow, they are pitting the armed factions against each other. And they've got black uniforms waiting in the wings when the pieces get through falling. This is the plan. If God doesn't intervene, and he shall, then they're going to try to do this. But they're going to do it. It's to some degree anyhow. Remember, Hillary had a 900 member list of names. The FBI had them. Well, she had about 2,400. And every congressman on Capitol Hill who'd ever had a skeleton in his closet said, uh-oh, Hillary's got a list of names. If you've done anything wrong, you can't vote to impeach Bill because they will get us. It was subtle blackmail. You see what they did? Is any head shaking? You see what they're doing? It was a subtle call. There was never any investigation of that, about what they're doing with all them lists. Nobody's ever prosecuted. I showed you the Beech Grove on the video. The one thing I did not show was I talked about the red and blue list, but I did not mention the red and blue zone sign. That is a pernicious sign, red and blue zone. There it is, red and blue zone. This thing's been sanitized now. They've taken all this stuff down. It didn't exist. It's still there, though. It doesn't take much to refurbish it. They spent $5.9 million on it. General Parton wrote an expose on the Oklahoma City bombing. And ladies and gentlemen watching this video, this simple diagram proves there was not an ounce of fertilizer there. There was a bomb in there, but it wasn't fertilizer. Fertilizer bomb would have left 2 hours of nitric acid floating in the air. You couldn't have breathed for 2 hours. And the Brisance wave of fertilizer, this is a building, will not cut reinforced concrete any further than that distance where that blue mark is. It could not have been fertilizer. There was 6 drums of fulminated mercury or something inside that building. TWA-800 was shot down with a continuous rod warhead missile. Long story, they wanted to blame the militia, but it got too high to be a stinger. And folks, I want to tell you, JP4 kerosene will not explode, sir. All you farmers know kerosene won't explode. JP4, even JP5's got a higher flash point even. Here's a slide of the visible government of the United States. Here's the President. The Federal Reserve runs everything, you know that. Here's the White House. Here's President Clinton. Here's the Cabinet. FEMA is one of the Cabinet members and all the Cabinet secretaries. Here's the Congress, the Supreme Court. Moscow's here. This is Europe, Brussels, the Vatican. Okay. Now, here's the Project Harmony cops that are operating out there. Here's the regional police that are out there. I've got them kind of what you call it, but they're out there. You see them sometimes you don't. You know, of course, Mr. Clinton went to England, made a speech, and the first question was, hey, what about the guy in Dallas with the 17 million signatures to impeach you, Mike Benn on Wilshire Boulevard? Mr. Clinton came back to the States. 2 days later, there was a helicopter over Mike Benn's house right here. He had a reverse floor plan. The chopper fired 2 rockets into his house. Who saw Linda Thompson's video, America Under Siege? Good. Hands. Thank you. The goons hit the wrong house, though. It was a house just like Mike's on the other side. What happened was they didn't burn the house down, and there was no lightning strike the house like the radio and TV broadcast said. Yeah. What happened was 2 hours later, the Secret Service came out. The Secret Service came out and took away the TVs and all the appliances. They had to do that because they had to get the appliances out of there and the TV out of there, because when TV gets struck by lightning, it ionizes the TV screen. They had to get it out of there. How was it done? Here's the simple thing right here. Here it is. What they did was the helicopters were sent out. Sister Hillary has 4 Mission Essential staffers in her cabinet and 12 more. They went into 20 inches of snow. They had to go in 20 inches of snow. 20 inches of snow, they had to go in. If you got somebody going to work in 20 inches of snow, you're running an operation. That's command and control. That's what they're doing. What happened? Well, the house didn't burn down. So the phone call was made to this young lady. She called Treasury Department to talk to this little liaison officer here, whose word is God, to this Secretary of Treasury. They called Secret Service. Secret Service called Dallas and said, get out there and get those, you got a badge and a gun, get out there and get that TV and those appliances in that rent-a-truck. That's how it was done. Now, General Parton, they sent a team. The word went out to Justice, go down and see General Parton and ask what he's going to talk about when he gets on the stand for McVeigh. What's he going to say? They weren't worried about his bombing expertise. They was worried about what he's going to say on the stand, and it's exactly what they asked him. The word went back. General Parton's going to say no fertilizer because it wasn't fertilizer, trying to blame the wrong people, and it wasn't fertilizer. If General Parton had been called to the stand, what do you think would have happened? Look at all the other guys, what they got. Admiral Borda was sent to Russia. He came back from Russia. He told the chairman, Mr. Shelikivili, he was born in Latvia, can't speak English too well, you know. And he told him, I'm not bringing any Chinese peacekeepers here to peacekeep on the West Coast, not in my Navy, not on my ships. Oh, the word went up, Admiral Borda's not going to cooperate. The Joint Chiefs aren't going to cooperate with us. We'll teach them to play ball. The word went out to the Black Ops. They went out to Borda's quarters. Guy called me from the Navy Yard and said, I heard multiple gunshots at the Navy Yard. An FBI agent called our favorite talk show host and said there were 3 bullet holes in his body. The Admiral knew everything had been shut down. He knew nothing worked. He knew everything was shut down. He knew the stuff couldn't work. He knew what was going on. And he said, no way, Jose. Admiral Jeremy Mike Borda was a hero. He had only one life to give for his country. And I would say to the other chiefs, if you don't do something, you have only one country to give for your life. Same thing happened to a guy on I-66. At a rest stop, he was taking pictures. He climbed over the sign, took pictures, took off in his car. These black ops guys, they saw him out there. He got a letter 2 weeks later from Transportation Department. What were you doing out there? What do you care? It's a free country. So what happens? What happened? They saw him out there. They couldn't write him. They got his tag number. They couldn't write him a letter because they don't exist. They called this young lady here. She called here and went over to Transportation, sent the guy a letter. What are you doing out there? That's how they do it. That's how they're working it. General Parton has had 2 cars smashed and totaled out. Almost totaled. His wife's and his. By Chinese-speaking people. Let's look at... I told you about TV talk show host Jody Houston Truitt. She got taken out. Waco, Oklahoma City, TWA, Value Jet, Bill Colby, ex-CA director, Jim McDougal, etc., and Vince Foster. And it's ad nauseum. It goes right on down the line, etc., etc., etc. This, folks, is how it's being accomplished. Here's the guys in charge. The devil's up here. You have these fellas here, the secret societies, the trilateral, the council of foreign relations, and the money mongers who are involved. This is how it works. There is a connectivity from Brussels, Belgium, the beast computer, to every head of state in the world. Take that to the bank. They're already calling the shots. They're already calling those shots and telling the White House what to do. I'm sure Janet Reno's instructions on Waco was called by the New World Order from Brussels, Belgium. Friedrichstrasse. Friedrichstrasse in Berlin was the place they coordinated the dirty tricks. They had one building where Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich were coordinating. They had a direct connectivity to the Reichstag, where Hitler was, to the Chancery, the Reich Chancery. They coordinated it. It had to be coordinated at a very, very top level. They had to, that's how they did it. In the book which I showed you in the video about the red and blue zone signs and the red and blue signs, red list was picked up before unobtrusive preparations for martial law were initiated. Blue list was picked up within 6 weeks of martial law announcement. This is how a thing works. There had to be a center for coordinating it. Friedrichstrasse was the place. History repeats itself because it is conspiratorial. It is not happenstance. There's many, many other things they're doing. Value Jet crashed. There was a guy on there who knew what happened to Vince Foster, that the money had been stripped out of Vince Foster's account. They had to bring it down. But the guy wasn't on the plane. He missed it. And so therefore, they downed the plane, and the guy later had to be shut up. He's now been locked up for child abuse. He's been silenced. If you don't have an angel of the Lord protecting you, you are dead meat. They can get anybody, anywhere, at any time. And that's how it's going. I could show you a couple of other names that are out there that would shock you. But Bill McDougal, a chopper landed outside. He took a shot to urinate, to take a drug test. And he was dead that evening. He was one of Kenneth Starr's main witnesses.
And I want to thank Al Cuppett for joining us tonight, and I want to apologize to all of you for the lack of a full interview. However, I also want to thank Al for allowing us to use some audio from his presentations to the Prophecy Club. Now, I know many of you do not agree with the Christian Patriot wing of the Truth Movement. However, I think you should allow yourself some sort of understanding of it. After all, this movement is pretty vast, and it includes a wide variety of opinions, ideologies, and yes, truths. So here's my point. I once in college had to do a project where I was tasked with explaining the U.S. political continuum. I not only had to explain it, but I had to place then current politicians along the continuum, explaining why they were at each and every point. Why was someone more to the far left? Why was someone more far right? Who were the independents in the middle? It was assumed that the line was just that, a line, a linear continuum. There was the far left, and there's the far right. They were at diametrically opposite ends of the U.S. political continuum. They were opponents, they were enemies, and they were opposites. It was not really until the mid-1990s that I began really thinking about that continuum once again. What I eventually realized was that the starting point, the original assumption, was incorrect. I began to formulate what I believed was a new, more honest continuum. It wasn't a straight line, the left wasn't opposite of the right wasn't opposite of the left, and they didn't have to be enemies. What I came up with was a continuum that more closely resembled, well, a horseshoe. Imagine it like this, if you will. Imagine that the original line is bent downward into a horseshoe shape. Imagine now that the far right and the far left are actually very close, but with a slight spatial separation. So then, who are their opponents, you might ask? Their opponents are those who are truly the furthest away, the people in the middle, the top rounded side of the horseshoe. Those who believe that the status quo, the mainstream media, is the source from where truthful news somehow emanates. Those who believe textbooks are valid sources of facts. And many who still believe that the words "a State Department spokesman said" are somehow credible. They are the opponents. See, the far left and the far right are both skeptical of the capital S state, and maybe for a variety of different reasons. Both wings believe that we do not get truth from our state-sponsored schools. Many have significant factual and ideological problems with textbooks, and many believe that Dan Rather, Bill O'Reilly, MSNBC, and Fox News are all cultural nightmares. So how far apart are they really? How far apart are they on the horseshoe? Not very far. If you're a truth seeker on the proudly radical left, you may just have a friend in the Christian patriots on the far right. If you're a proud Second Amendment pro-sovereignty constitutionalist from Montana, you may just have a friend in the occupiers of Wall Street. Are we really that far apart? I don't think we are. Both wings are fighting the same people for truth, justice, and freedom as it is defined by each faction. Both wings are fighting the middle, the stupidly satisfied status quo, not one another. And that is why everyone in this audience tonight needs to understand Al Cuppett, even if they agree with neither Al Cuppett nor his beliefs. I'm S.T. Patrick, and this has been episode 002 of the Midnight Rider News Podcast, Al Cuppett versus the New World Order. If you would like to download this episode, you can do so, and you can subscribe on iTunes. For free, of course. If you would like to email me with comments, show ideas, or questions for upcoming guests, please contact me at midnightridernews@gmail.com. That's midnightridernews@gmail.com. And again, remember that Rider is spelled W-R-I-T-E-R. We're going to take 2 weeks off for Christmas and the arrival of the new year, but we hope and pray that 2017 will be a spectacular year for the show and for the site midnightridernews.com. We hope you will all join us. Until then, from the other side of the mountain, on the best side of midnight, I wish you peace.